Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Whatcha Watching right here on the Hollywood Critics Association Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Twitter feed. So today we have a full panel once again, 4 members, including myself, talking about what they've been watching and how this show works is very simple because, as you can guess from the title, we are just going around the table and basically telling you what we watch, what we have been watching, and whether or not we would recommend you watching that show or movie. So right away, we are going to introduce our panel, starting off with a person who has not been on this show yet, a newbie to Whatcha Watching, and that is Dan Murrell.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to finally be on the show.
Awesome. So, Dan, you need to do a little bit of a pitch. Do like a 30-second pitch for yourself.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually a lot of changes. Back in April, I launched my own little enterprise on YouTube and Patreon and elsewhere, but you can mainly find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Dan Murrell Movies. I launched a movie channel right when they stopped releasing movies, so it's been a very interesting few months, but you get creative. That's what you do. So, that's mainly where you can find me now. I'm doing movies and TV shows and streaming, you name it. Whatever we can find to review, we're just ramping it up and doing what we can.
All right, awesome. And then we have Lupe. Hello, Lupe.
Hey,
welcome back.
Out there. Thank you.
You know the drill. Where can the nice people find you?
All right, I run cinemovie.tv. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at cinemovie.tv. And on YouTube. Don't forget YouTube. We got a bunch of interviews there as well.
Yeah, you've been getting a lot of traction on that YouTube stuff lately, I've noticed.
Yeah, a lot of interviews coming through, so at least I'm happy about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then we have Mr. James White.
Hi, folks. Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back.
And do your little pitch.
So I can be found occasionally in the pages, but mostly on the website of Empire Magazine in the UK. And I have recently launched my own blog, which you can find at jameswhite, all one word, .substack.com. And it's a place where I write about pop culture stuff. I write about weekend recommendations of movies to watch, the occasional bit of short story fiction, and anything else I want to put out there in the world. And hopefully that's where people can come and read it.
Awesome. All right. So, again, for those who are just tuning in, how this goes is that we're just going to be doing like a roundtable discussion. Each person will have 2 picks that they recommend or may not recommend. It's just something that they've been watching recently. And we're going to start off with Dan Murrell. What is your first pick?
Well, it's a show that I've been hearing about for a long time. My mom and my partner, Mara, both got hooked on it together and then have been trying to get me into it. And now with a little bit of extra time that we've had, and I was visiting home last week, I finally got into it, and that is Succession on HBO. I think it really is evidence of how many great TV shows there are right now and just how much TV there is, because I think if this show had come out 10 years ago, then it would have the kind of hype that a show like The Wire or The Sopranos, back when HBO was one of the only people doing premium TV. Now there's so many different networks and so many different people doing television that it's just one of many great shows on the air. But it really is a fascinating show. I'm about halfway through season 2 right now, so we got about 5 episodes left. Sadly, there would be a new season premiering shortly, but they didn't even get to start filming on the 3rd season before everything shut down. So season 3 is TBD, but it's just a really fascinating look at this kind of Rupert Murdoch-esque family, this media mogul and his children, and this battle between is it time for him to step aside? And if so, who's going to take over? So many Emmy nominations. When the Emmy nominations came out last week, almost everyone in the main cast was nominated. The show's nominated. So it's catching on, but I think it's one of those shows that in a smaller landscape like there was even 5 or 6 years ago may have caught on even quicker. But I'm glad I'm on board now because I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. So this is a show that Dan has recommended to me, Jazz has recommended to me, and I still have not watched it. I'm slowly getting through the TV shows because now I feel like I'm starting to fade from movies right now because I'm not liking a lot of what's coming out. So now I'm starting to dig more into TV shows, and I will agree that a lot of people have been saying this for probably the last couple of years. TV seems to be where a lot of great stuff is at right now. I'm finishing Normal People tonight, which is probably one of the best TV shows that I've ever seen. If you guys have not seen this show, you need to see it. But to stay on topic, has anyone else seen Succession, and would they like to throw their 2 cents in about it?
That's on my to-watch list. So, especially now, I'll go to the top of the list.
Okay. How about you, James? Did you see it?
Yeah, a little bit like Dan. I had it recommended by a few people. People seem to be really enjoying it. And it took me a while to think about watching it, because the concept of it in some ways, just based on the bare bones concept, kind of put me off. It's a bunch of really loathsome people, rich white people just trying to squabble about power in a big media family. But I started watching it because I was told how good it was, and I thought, okay, I'll just give it a shot. I'll give it an episode or two to really convince me. And I was pretty much hooked from the start, because the performances are so good. You love these people, you hate these people, you love to hate these people, and you hate to love these people at the same time. It's all in one. And it's just all these different little warring personalities are so much fun to watch them interact. You've got people like Kieran Culkin, who can deliver an acid-tip barb like few people around. You've got Brian Cox, obviously. You've got Sarah Snook. You've got all these sorts of people who are just really, really, really good. And there's a moment in season 2 which features a rap, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it's something that has to be seen to be believed. It's a really, really fun show. Just really well made, really well written, really well acted. Just I love it. It's really good. I'm sad that they won't be able to make a new season for a while.
All right, so Dan and James, since you have seen this show, you both, based on your glowing recommendations, I'm going to guess that you think that all those Emmy nominations are well deserved.
Definitely. I mean, I am a very bad offender as far as the putting TV shows on my to watch list. Like, I have not seen Watchmen yet. There's so many things that I have not watched yet. But so I haven't seen all of the competition, but I will say, just from speaking of what I've seen, I think that very well deserved recognition. And I've seen some of the television that it's up against, and it's up against the shows that I've seen some great competition. I think it deserves to be up there with those other shows. All
right, awesome. All right, Lupe, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the second topic. And what is your first pick for Whatcha Watching?
All right, so I'm just kind of watching random things that pop up on Netflix because I'm so lazy. Let's check this out. Let me see what they recommend. So it's called The Business of Drugs. I think it's a 6-part documentary, and basically it's a former CIA analyst investigates all sorts of drugs. You have each episode is dedicated to the type of drugs. So you'll have one on heroin, meth, synthetics, which I had no idea about, and that's like your acids and stuff like that. Cannabis, so all the ugly stuff. And it basically breaks down how it works as a business. And when you finish watching this show, you realize the drug business is never going to end, because there are so many layers to this show, to the business. You have downright from the farmer who's farming these plants, to the drug runner, the carrier. I mean, it's just so complicated. And she breaks down like the money, who makes the most money. And especially when you're coming from poor countries where a lot of these drugs come from, they have no other choice but to peddle in drugs, because they have no other way of making a living. So these people get like 20,000. I mean, these people are making bank doing even the little things for the drug trade. And it's a really interesting show. And like I said, it's from the business side of it. Doesn't talk about addiction, except for the opioids and the prescription drugs. It really gets down to how politics has really made it worse for opioids, and pharmaceutical companies getting involved with politicians. And it's just a really good show. I thought I was just going to do one show, but it was just so interesting and so detailed. And this woman she's meeting with all kinds of people, from drug cartel to just, the little peddler, everybody. And the stories you hear is basically that all these people are doing it because they need a way to survive, and it pays. So it's a really good show if you're interested in that kind of rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, Lupe, I got to give you credit on this show. I think this is the third time you've been on. and you've always, I mean, this not to give anyone else like slap them on the wrist or anything, but you always come up with, I think, like the most unique of all the picks, because I think you dig a little bit deeper. And maybe it's just your variety of what you watch, and maybe that's what makes this group so great, is that we always have like such diverse opinions and interests. But that's what I've just noticed. Like, I would have never heard of this show before. I would never have even watched it. It would have been on my radar. So I appreciate you always giving like these picks.
That's what I'm saying. The Netflix interface is the best one because they know what I'm going to watch. And so they pop up. I'm like, oh, let me check this out. See, or if it's a title that a lot of people are talking about, then I'll check it out. But Netflix, the interface, I love the interface because they know exactly the types of things I like. And it can be all ranges of genres. And, they'll come up with their suggestion list. And I'm like, damn, they're so good. Damn it. As soon as I decide I'm going to go do a Hulu show or an Amazon Prime, they hook me in with something else. And that's what always happens. So I rarely get to Hulu and Amazon Prime.
That's why they're the king.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why now they're worth more than Disney right now.
Wow.
Well, oh yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Well, no, it's kind of crazy when you think they don't have hotels, they don't have theme park. Like, there's a lot of but I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of things that they don't have that Disney has, and they have more money than them right now. Just saying. All right. I'm guessing Dan, James, you're probably in the same boat. You probably never heard of this before this show.
I think I might have seen the thumbnail as I'm flipping through Netflix. No, but I haven't checked it out. It's on my list now.
Actually, I have seen this one.
Boy,
Yeah.
James is gonna prove me wrong. Good.
Well, my other half found it when she was searching. Weirdly, she was searching for something to watch at night while falling asleep. And this doesn't sound like the sort of thing that gently soothes you off to sleep. It more sends you into a panic about how the world is going to hell. But it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. The CIA analyst, who's sort of the lead of the show, who's basically doing all the interviews and doing the research and everything, she is incredibly good at what she does. She's incredibly good at finding the information, really digging deep into it, and then sort of getting it out there in a way that makes it easy to understand. It's a terrifying prospect. It's a really scary thing to see how it all works and how it all succeeds. But it's absolutely so brilliantly presented, so well done, and there are some amazing little revelations, all sorts of things like the history of acid and the people who are growing, the weird sort of dichotomy between the people who are home growing pot, who used to do it when it was still illegal, and now the big sort of farm companies trying to come in now that it's more legal in places like California and slowly edging them out because they have the resources to do it on a huge scale. It's incredible. It's really good. The only thing it's missing is an episode about Breaking Bad, but it's a meta episode. It's just nothing to do with Walter White. So yeah.
And what I like is that it's not judgmental. It's just kind of presenting, this is how it works, guys. And there's no judgment. And then when you hear these people's stories, you're like, oh, you can understand why they're in the drug business. Because on the outside, we're like, oh, they're bad people. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, it's not about that. It's about survival.
Yeah.
And so the only way to get rid of drugs is the users. So once the demand goes down, then the business goes down. But otherwise, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. Literally.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, both Lupe and James, for that. Going back to you, James, what is your first pick?
Yeah, my first pick is it's Psych 2, Lassie Come Home, which is the latest TV movie spun off from the USA TV series Psych. I've been a fan of Psych pretty much since it started. I saw the first episode. I was mostly sort of drawn in by the fact it was Dule Hill, who I used to really think was good on the West Wing. But it's basically every episode is sort of a murder mystery idea or a crime procedural, based on the idea that the lead, played by James Rode Rodriguez, is a guy called Sean Spencer, who has an eidetic memory. He can really see all the little details and remember them, but he trades in the fact that he claims he's a psychic. He uses his skill to convince people he's a psychic, and he basically helps or hinders the Santa Barbara Police Department, along with his best mate Gus, played by Hill, in basically solving crimes and catching criminals. honestly, the criminal side of things is really just a delivery system for the gags. The two of them, Rodriguez and Hill, they're a fantastic double act. They really have good chemistry. The rest of the cast is really good. You've got people like Corbin Burnson. You've got all sorts of people in the show. Timothy Ormanson, who's a big part of Lassie Come Home, plays one of the police officers they often work with, who's more of a straight-laced but also slightly weird kind of dude. And so they've since the series is finished, they've spun off 2 movies. The first one, and now this Lassie Comes Home, which was available on launch day on the Peacock streaming service. So of course I was going to go and check that out, and it's free to stream with a couple of ads, which didn't work very well on the Peacock system, but I'm guessing they probably ironed that out now. And Psych is just a really good, fun show. There's all sorts of pop culture homages. There's all sorts of little references. There's running gags, and unusually for a show like this, the characters have actually shown a bit of development. Like Sean has married one of the detectives he used to sort of annoy a lot, and Gus has moved on with his life a little bit. Everything isn't always just quite status quo, even if they have to find lots of excuses to get them all back together for the latest movie when they do it. But it's a really good one.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Did anyone else a fan of Psych, I should say first?
Mara has been trying to get me into it because she's a procedural junkie. So she's always watching a new, or rewatching. And so she said she's trying to get me into Psych because she said, you'll love it because it's got a bunch of movie references, which it does. So I've seen several episodes, but I keep trying to convince her to let me watch the movies with her because she wants to see them. She's like, no, you're not going to, there's too many running jokes. You have to watch the whole show. So it may be a while.
Yeah, I heard the same thing, Dan. It's funny. I heard it's like really good for people who are like, I guess people like us who are into pop culture and movies and TV, because there's a lot of like throwbacks and things to that in there. I don't know. It just never even intrigued me to actually watch it. And I know it's so popular. Obviously you have two movies now, but I don't know. It's just one of those shows that I've been putting off for so long that I don't know if I'll ever watch it.
It's like Burn Notice.
Yeah, it seems like all the USA shows are a little bit like that. You're like, you've heard of it?
Yeah.
Like seems like Suits and things like that. You feel like, oh, should I see that? People talk about it. I feel like I should have seen it. I feel like I have seen it, but no, you don't know. Psych, though, I really can recommend Psych. It's just fun. It's easy to watch. It's fun. It's quick-witted. They do a lot of really fun stuff with movies. They do sort of recurring episodes where they'll spoof like murder mysteries or John Hughes films or things like that.
I'm in.
It's just really well done. It's very knowing. It's very clever. It's very funny. It's very silly at times. It's absolutely silly. There are moments where it's just absolutely stupid. But they've done everything from the musical episode that everyone seems to have done at one point to black and white episodes to film noir to all sorts. I just really enjoy it. I wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure. I'd call it a genuine pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. My first pick is something that you'll very rarely hear me talk about on this show, and that is something that premiered on Disney Plus. And that is this show called Muppets Now, because I am a product of the 80s, which means that I grew up watching The Muppet Show and watching all of the Muppet movies, and they have a very soft spot in my heart, and I love and watch most of the stuff that the Muppets have come out with, including that really short-lived ABC show from a couple years ago, which I felt like was really going somewhere, but they just pulled the plug on it really, really quick. So to my surprise on Disney Plus, this show popped up during our wonderful pandemic quarantine time. And I was bummed to learn that it is doing the one episode a week format, instead of just putting a bunch of the episodes up at once. Instead, you get to watch one episode at a time. So I only watched the first episode, which had a guest star of RuPaul on there. And it's an interesting show because it's something that I never thought I would see the Muppets do. It's basically the Muppets in a YouTube setting, more or less. They basically are creating various web shorts and it's made into like almost a like about a 30-minute show, very much like a Saturday Night Live skit in a lot of ways, where it's just like a little bit of a short skit here and there, about 10 to 15 minutes each one. First episode was pretty good. I think this is the type of show that almost like belongs like more on a YouTube thing where you would watch like a small snippet of it. But I guess for Disney Plus, it's kind of fitting. I'll probably keep watching it. I think it's also going to be one of those shows that I will more than likely forget about until all the episodes come out. And then I might just like sit down and binge watch it, because coming back to Disney Plus every single week to watch like a 28-minute show, probably not going to happen, because I've never opened that damn app. Because I'm just going to say it, I think Disney Plus, out of like most of the major streaming services that they launched, is probably the most disappointing so far. I know that there was a lot of buildup and a lot of hype, and that they have a lot of stuff planned. But as it stands, with like maybe like the exception of like Hamilton and The Mandalorian for Star Wars fans, I mean, there's really just nothing on the service besides, catalog stuff that if, most of us probably own on Blu-ray or DVD, because we love this stuff and we're collectors of that stuff. So
it's basically a babysitting service.
Oh, it's a babysitting service, very much so.
Yeah, for kids, you're pumped. Wait, watch this.
Yeah. Did anyone else see Muppets Now, or no interest?
I got a screener link. I mean, I love the Muppets growing up, but I think after the last, was it 2 movies? I just lost interest. I'm like, it's not the same. Just the voices are different.
Kermit sounds different.
Yeah.
Oh, Kermit's really bad on the show. I was going to say it's really, really distracting.
Yeah.
More so than even in the movies. But in that show, I was like, well, that's not Kermit. Like, what is this?
Yeah, as opposed to something like Succession, I'd actually heard pretty bad things about the show. I know colleagues in the UK who'd had an early link of it and were just very, very disappointed. And I checked out about 5-10 minutes of it, maybe. I think it was a Miss Piggy Beauty thing with I think it was Taye Diggs.
Yes,
like that. And honestly, it didn't really do it for me. And I'm a huge Muppet nerd from way back, even though apparently my mother always tells the story of the first time I ever saw the Muppets. I turned to my mother at the tender age of somewhere around probably 4 and said, "Why are they funny, Mum?" And I really don't want to have trouble, so I can go back and shake that child and be like, "Because they're geniuses, you idiot." But, Muppets Now, I might try it. I might try it again. I might watch a bit more of it. I'm just not quite sold yet.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, because I do want to just chime in on what you said, and I think Dan also hit upon this. It's a weird thing, because like if you grew up with the Muppets, it's like as it's kind of gone on, they try to bring them into the modern era, and I feel like they lose something because they're in modern times. Like there's something so wholesome and sweet about them that you almost want them to be stuck in like the 80s or the 90s, maybe even the 70s for those who like the Muppet Show. But like the more and more they try to modernize it, I think the less and less it has appeal, because you're really I don't think you're going to create new Muppet fans. I think it's literally like you have to go after the nostalgia, because kids nowadays, when they watch Muppets, they're not going to be amused by it. It's like technology's gone too far, animation's gone too far. It's something that like, it's like if Mr. Rogers were still alive and making episodes, we would be watching it, but like most kids probably wouldn't be. So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about the Muppets. It doesn't feel right in modern times. And I keep trying because I love them so much, but like, it's kind of like always like, maybe. All right. We are swinging back around. We are going to go back to Dan. And what is your second pick, Dan?
So my second pick is a movie that we actually saw at the drive-in a few weeks ago. We just needed to see a movie, and we went to the drive. There's a drive-in about an hour away from here. And it's a movie that we actually quite like, but you can stream it on Hulu now. You can rent it VOD. It's called The Lodge. And it is from the directors of a horror movie from Austria that came out a few years ago called Goodnight Mommy, which is a super creepy horror movie. But it's about these two kids who go to this snowy lodge out in the woods with their father and then their father's new girlfriend, basically their new mom. And things happen. The new mom is played by Riley Keough, who's great in this movie. Alicia Silverstone plays the kid's mom. And the directors are Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz. But if you've seen Goodnight Mommy, which I thought was super creepy, the whole thing didn't quite come together for me, but I thought the movie itself was exceptionally well made. This is actually, it was a big surprise for me. I just love it. The atmosphere, Jaden Martell and Liam McHugh, who play the two kids. Of course, Jaden Martell, who's in like, he and Finn Wolfhard have like the market cornered on like kids and stuff right now. But they play the kids, and it is really this psychological game, and it kind of keeps you guessing because these things start happening. Of course, you're in the isolation. It shares some DNA with The Shining that way, just this cold isolation. But these things start happening, and you start to wonder, with Riley Keough's character, she's been through some things in her past that, are they resurfacing? Is this all in her imagination, or is there something else going on? Are they being played or tricked? It really keeps you guessing right up until the end. And then it ends in a way that I think it's one of those things where I think people are going to watch it and either love it or be like, oh, all this for that. It's one of those kind of movies, but I like, I tend to like those kinds of movies. So, excuse me. Trying to hold that in. Pardon me. But yeah, no, it really is. It's very much about atmosphere. It's very much about, looking at these characters and trying to piece out what's going on. And I really, really got into it and really dug it. So it's a recommendation for me. It was one of those movies that I think it made the festival circuits last year and then has started going on VOD and then a lot of drive-in theaters this year.
Okay, so this is a good movie to talk about because I know that people probably have different opinions on this if you saw it. Lupe, what'd you think?
Well, like he said, you thought it was going to go one way, and then it goes another way, and then by the end, I wasn't sure if I liked it because it was so effed up. What happens in the movie? Yeah. It was just like, what? So I don't know. I was kind of on the fence about that one. I wasn't sure how I felt. I don't know if I didn't think it was a good payoff.
Yeah, it doesn't end with a bang, a big explosion. It ends, a little more on a down note, which
kind of like a jaw dropping moment. You're like, oh.
Yeah, which I get. Like a lot of times I'll see a movie like that and I'll have that same kind of reaction, just like, oh, I don't really know if that was for me. Like, for whatever reason, this one in particular, when we got to the end, I was like, that kind of, my jaw kind of dropped. I was like, oh wow, but it is one of those movies that's like, and that's okay. That's what I always try to tell people. With movies like Hereditary, which is my favorite movie that came out a couple years ago, but like, it's not a movie that everyone's gonna, it's gonna be their thing. And that's totally cool. Like, there shouldn't be a consensus, like you have to like this and you can't like that. It's like, everybody has their own taste and it's cool. If one person likes something, for another person, maybe it's not for them. That's, there's no problem with that.
Yeah, actually reminded me of Hereditary because I was on the fence too with Hereditary's ending. I was like, what the F?
Yeah.
Because I had to watch it again and see like, wait a minute, does this make, I always have to make sense of movies.
Right.
And so when things don't make sense, I'm like, I don't get it, or I don't understand. And I would talk to different people and every single person had a different viewpoint of the ending. And there were some debates I had with a few people. And in this film, I think it's a little clearer. But what I did like is that they play with your expectations of a horror movie, of a thriller, and then it doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go. So that's why I think in the end you're not sure if you like it or not, or you did because it psyched you. It's like psych.
Yeah,
it's not what you thought.
James, what's your thoughts?
Well, this one I have to admit, we've actually found one I haven't seen yet. It kind of passed me by, which is kind of surprising because I did like Goodnight Mommy. And I just didn't, I don't think I might have got a screen link for it, or I might have got a PR email about it. But honestly, it just never quite popped up on my radar. I'm not always the world's biggest horror fan. It's not massively my genre, but it's one that, given what you guys have been saying about it, I'm definitely going to check out now and I give it a shot for sure. It just passed me by. I just hadn't had a chance to really see it. And, I think we've all been feeling that there's so much to see right now that you sort of pick and choose a little bit and you get burned out on certain things. So, yeah, I literally haven't seen it yet. So sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's like, I mean, those two summed it up perfectly. I mean, I'm more with Lupe on that. I really kind of walked away from it being like, all right. I wanted more at the end, and I just kind of walked off, and I was just like, okay. But I have to say that, like, I feel like there's this like new genre of horror movie that's kind of like this. I mean, Hereditary falls into that. I think there's a movie called, I know it's not out yet and I can't talk about it, but there was a movie called Saint Maud that was supposed to open that has very similar tone and Midsummer in a weird way. Like there's a lot of these movies are all kind of for the same type of audience. And I don't really think that you'll love them unless you love one of them, and then you'll probably love all of them. And then if you don't love them, you'll probably have the same reaction to most of them.
Which is weird because I'm usually in that camp. I'm usually in the can't, like when I saw It Comes at Night and The Witch, both movies came in, and maybe it's because they came in so hyped for me, and I think they fall into the same kind of horror genre that you're seeing now, which is like very slow, very deliberate, very underplayed, very, it takes its time. Usually I'm kind of in the category. Like this one, for whatever reason, and Hereditary, I'm like way more positive than I have been on some of the other ones that are very similar kinds of horror films.
Interesting. All right. Moving on to our next topic. James, back to you. What do you got for your second pick?
Well, this time I've dug back into the archive slightly for a show that I've been watching that's been out for a while, and it is Scrubs, mostly driven by the fact that I've been really enjoying Zach Braff and Donald Faison's rewatch podcast about the show called Fake Doctors, Real Friends. And it's a lovely sort of rambling chat between the two of them. They'll often have guest stars and from the show, and the creator Bill Lawrence has a very funny running thing where he'll scream 5, 6, 7, 8 and start the podcast theme tune going when he's trying to get out of an awkward question or just for fun. But the podcast is really good. But the show itself, again, it was one I started watching right from the start, and it's set at a hospital called Sacred Heart, and it follows the sort of coming of age experiences of a group of young doctors led by Zach Braff's John Dorian, or JD, who's sort of a nerdy, slightly awkward sometimes kind of guy who's given to flights of fantasy. Like he'll drift off into these elaborate fantasies of things happening, like he'll go to medieval times, or he's a dog in a dog show being assessed by a judge, all that kind of stuff. And it's really great because it's a mixture created again by Bill Lawrence, this mixture of really wacky, funny, silly stuff that can also pivot on a pinhead and absolutely go to really sort of emotional moments. I mean, it's set in a hospital. They don't shy away from the fact that illness can be horrible, death can lurk around every corner, or in this case, sometimes he can be selling Girl Guide cookies for his daughter. But it's a really, really well done show. I know people have trouble with the lead character. Sometimes they find him a little bit annoying, but it's such a good ensemble. Faison, there's Judy Reyes, there's John C. McGinley, who is fantastic in the show. And it's just a really well-rounded show that admittedly by the end of it wasn't quite what it was at the start, but so many shows go that way. They tried to spin it off into a med school show for a year, and that didn't really work out well because you kind of just missed the original cast who would pop in for cameos. But it's such a well-rounded, well-created show. I really enjoy it, and it's like Psych. It's another in the genre of black dude, white dude, or friends and are funny. So I feel like I've basically delivered an entire genre here. So yeah, I'm just a fan. I went back and started rewatching it with the podcast, and I'm just really, really enjoying revisiting it, seeing the highs, the lows, and how well it does its thing.
All right. So does anyone else like black guy, white guy friendship TV show about doctors?
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, I watched it when it was on in the early years. I have not revisited it, but I remember enjoying it when it was, on TV, and you'd actually watch it when it was airing. It's this crazy thing that used to happen.
Once a week, remember?
Once a week.
Once a week. Yeah, I think I watched the first season because at the time I knew Judy Reyes, and I was like, I'm going to support. But then after the first season, I thought the gags were just, regurgitated. So I was like, okay, I saw it. It was funny, but it's just the same gag over and over again. Everyone plays to the caricature. So
I always think of that line whenever I hear Scrubs. If you guys ever remember that Family Guy episode where he's like, they're watching Scrubs on there, and then Peter goes, "Which one's the funny guy?" I think about that when I watch that show whenever it's on now, because I'm again with you, Lupe. I watched the first season, and I literally was like, "Boy, did this get stale quickly." But yet people love it. But I feel that way about a lot of mainstream stuff. Like Friends, I don't really understand like the appeal of Friends, but I know it has cult following. But I mean, even shows that I really like The Office, even as that went on, like once you got to season 5, I was like, okay, like this is over. Like stop. It's enough is enough.
Yeah, I think that's when I stopped season 5 for The Office.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Scrubs, I think is been on a lot, and like you said, they have the podcast now. It has such a dedicated, loyal fan base. It's always amazing when you have these shows that went on for so long, but like the fan base is so supportive of them. It's kind of crazy, and the only reason I say that is because my wife works for a trivia company. Ashley works for a trivia company, and they're always doing themed events or questions about stuff that's popular. So like I'm always get ideas of like what's really still popular. So anywho, right. Going back to Lupe, what is your second pick?
All right, I could bet nobody's watched this on Netflix. It's a series, On My Block. Because it's about teens.
I watched it, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
So anyway, don't judge me. I finished watching The Kissing Booth 2. The teen in me called me. It was a dumb movie. But so this was recommended right after. And oh my God, I was blown away. This is the fact that I'm seeing On My Block after I watched Kissing Booth. It was like a tale of two cities. Because in Kissing Booth, you have teens living in an affluent area, probably a beach community. I don't think they ever say what area. And then you have the kids on my block who are in a South Central place called Free Ridge. I haven't had time to see if that's an actual area in South Central. And it's about friendship, because the Kissing Booth is also about a friendship between a guy and a girl. And as they're growing up, they're not growing apart. They're actually growing closer, but there's a little bit of tug and war. And here it's the same exact thing. It's a friendship between 4 people. And you have 2 Latinos and you have 2 African Americans, and actually one girl is Afro-Latina. And it's just an amazing show. I am shocked. I have not heard of this show. Apparently, it's a very popular show. It was on the top number 1 show, I think, in March when it premiered the 4th season. So it's very popular with the teens. I'm just really shocked that they haven't pushed this show, because not only does it take place in South Central, but these are underprivileged kids, and these are smart kids, and they're trying to stay away from all the gangs and the trouble, because they want to have a future. They want to go to college. They want to study. They want to get out of the hood. And so you have all of those themes in there. And there's a running gag. Whenever there's a gunshot, they always try to name the type of gun. And it's just satire done really, really well. It's a great balance. I mean, it is a very funny show. And the influence here is the Goonies, if you can believe that. The Goonies, but set in an urban setting. And basically, they go on a treasure hunt. And it's a robbery that happened, of course, in the video. It's a robbery that happened years ago, and it's like a myth that there's this money laying around. So they have to find a way to find this money, not because they want to save somebody's house, but in this case, they want to save this kid named Cesar, played by Diego Tinoco. And he's basically lives with his brother, who's a gang member. And basically, they're going to jump him into the gang. And the kids are like, no, you can't do that. We're going to go to college. We're going to have better things. But the fact that he has no parents and his dad is in jail, his mom, I think, died of a drug overdose. I mean, some heavy, heavy themes, but they do it with comedy. And it's so well balanced. I'm just shocked that nobody's even nominated this show, because it just deals with so much. It's so layered, especially right now. We're talking about the Black Lives Movement and the fact that these underrepresented kids, they have to fight double time to stay on course. And you have somebody who gets shot, mistaken identity by a gang member. and it gets very emotional. I actually cried. I was like so emotional because I grew up in the barrio, the ghetto, and so a lot of the things that they're going through, I went through that. Whereas my mom's trying to keep me away from the bad elements in the neighborhood. Like, no, you're not going to be this way. You're going to supersede all these bad elements and move up in this world. So it's a great show. I'm surprised nobody's giving it critical acclaim because it's just so well balanced. The comedy, it's a comedy, but it just deals with all these really heavy subjects. And so I don't know, I was thinking of writing it in Netflix and be like, what is going on? You guys have a very important show on your hands here and nobody's talking about it. The kids are talking about it. It's a very popular show. I actually tweeted something about the Kissing Booth having a third movie coming out, and I had all these people react to that. And then somebody said, what about On My Block? And I said, what is On My Block? So actually, that's when I researched it. And then when it popped up on Netflix after watching the Kissing Booth 2, I was like, oh, let me go see what the hype is about. And the hype is real, guys. I mean, for young kids who are growing up in that type of world, it calls to you because nobody is doing the show. It's kind of like Boys in the Hood, but here you have a more modern tale of it. They're not athletes. These people are very smart. They're very intelligent. They're only 14 years old. But I was shocked at the level of sex. It's like, she's 14, she's having sex. Oh my God, I'm old value. Same thing in the Kissing Booth. They're 16, 17, and they're off having sex. The parents are not even in the picture. And here, the same thing. The parents are not even in the picture. They pretty much do whatever they want. You have Lyft, you have Uber to take you anywhere. So, like I said, a tale of two cities with these two shows. It was kind of like, I was so shocked that this happened that it was like a double feature, but yet it's such a tale of two cities. It was just, it kind of took me aback, and I thought, wow, I don't know, check it out if you can. I mean,
I'll tell you, you sold me on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if
I'm definitely gonna watch. I'm gonna add to the queue tonight.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to be from the hood to really enjoy it because all the themes in the show I can relate to. Like, I saw my first murdered body coming out of a house. I mean, that I'll never forget. I think I was 10. My neighbors, my friend who was my neighbor, her brother came home running and he got shot in the leg, and we were freaking out. I think I was like 12. So all that stuff happens in the show, and and we're trying to ignore that stuff, but sometimes you can't ignore it because it's just a reality that's ugly. But yeah, it doesn't define me, but it's still like this show reminds you of like, oh shit, like that is me. So I don't know if somebody who's not from a underprivileged area could relate. So I don't know if, like I said, that's why I maybe love it more so because I could relate to all that stuff. Like I can't name a gun. To this day, like, what was that? Like, that was a gunfire. I'm like, okay, shit. But they use humor to deal with a lot of stuff, and you have all sorts of emotions on that show. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to bring it up to Netflix, like why they have not submitted this show for awards or some sort of critical acclaim, because especially with what we're going through right now, the subject matter, Black Lives Matter, this is a very important show to show that, hey guys, this is why the Black Lives Matter, because underrepresented kids have to deal with so much, and sometimes they don't get out, and that's what happens to one of the characters. He doesn't get out because the pressures of not having a parent and he's homeless at one point because his brother has banned him from the gangs because he was sent to murder somebody and he couldn't do it. That's not the life he wants. So he was homeless for a while. So, and the kids are working towards getting that money to help him out. I mean, come on, how relevant? I mean, how sad is that situation?
Yeah, that's true.
But done in a comedic way.
That's such the double-edged sword of having so many new places that are making things and so many new resources is like, it's great that new experiences and new voices are getting access to tell stories like that. But the flip side is that like, there's also so many things. It's that harder to cut through the noise and get it seen and get it out there and get the voice out, like with Netflix, it's like they were probably promoting 6 other things that week. Yeah. They can't, but at the same time, like you want people to have that opportunity. And that's what I love hearing about shows like that, where somebody's saying like, I feel like I was represented for the first time, or I feel like this spoke to me in a way that I haven't seen a show do, which I think is great. But at the same time, there's so much stuff now. It's like, how do you get it out there? And it really is like the two sides of the coin, where it's like so many more opportunities to have your voice heard, but also so many other things that are competing. and to break through that. So you sold me on it too. I'm going to check it out.
Like I said, that's why I preface it with maybe it's because I come from that world, and somebody else might not be able to relate, like the kids on the kissing booth, because all they're worried about is, who I'm going to have sex with. But
that's what I think. But Lupe, that's what I think is really good about stuff like that. Like if it's a really well crafted and well written show, I think it almost like defies that. Like it literally can be anyone who watches it will be able to connect with it. They may not say like, "Oh, I know this story. I can relate to this," like you did. But they might say like, "Oh, this may give them more perspective of stuff that they see on TV and why these Black Lives Matter, why that movement is so important." I think that's what I love about certain TV shows. I mean, another one that I would recommend on Netflix that no one talks about is, it's White Show, but I'm just saying, is Atypical, which deals with a kid who's on the spectrum and how he's trying to like live a normal life and go to school and go to college, but he struggles with it and how he has to like pull himself back and how he tries to have a dating life. And again, like it's new to me because I don't really interact with a lot of people on the spectrum, but it gives me a new appreciation, a new understanding. So I think this show, from the way you describe it, will do the exact same thing to anyone who watches it. They'll have a new appreciation, a new respect, and maybe even have a little bit more sympathy for people in those communities. So, did you see this show? Hear of it?
This one I hadn't. This one had rather sort of passed me again, a little bit like The Lodge. But the way Lupe's talked about it, and like you were saying, if it's a really, really well done show, it's something that everyone should at least check out and try. I mean, you might not connect with it, but you might just love it anyway. I mean, I love the Muppets, but I'm not made of felt. And talking about unexpected sex scenes, I have to say Muppets Now was really surprising. But
all right, awesome. All right, so since we're running a little bit low on time, I want to actually just switch this to do our like little short special topic, since this was like a huge news story yesterday. And I wanted to talk with everyone and get their take on this wonderful movie right here. Mulan is going to be skipping movie theaters and will be going to Disney Plus, and it will have a price tag of $29.99, which is the price of it. But the requirement of having a Disney Plus subscription seems to be the point where people are kind of going like, I don't know if I like that. It's double dipping the chip. People are not happy about this. Guys, I would love to hear your takes. We'll start with James. What's your take on this?
Well, here's the thing about this. Obviously, it's going to be fairly disappointing for people that want to see it on the big screen. It's a movie that's built for the big screen, that's got the spectacle, that's got the range and the scope, and you really do want to see it on the big screen. And I know it will be on the big screen in certain places. I mean, I think places where Disney doesn't have Disney Plus set up, like China for one, and a few other places, it will be in cinemas. As for the price point and the needing the subscription, I think it'll make sense for certain groups, particularly Disney's main target audience, families who might have, you go out to the cinema with a couple of kids, you've got the cinema tickets, you've got concessions to buy, you've maybe got parking charges, you might try and go out for a meal at the same time. And so it all basically adds up. So if you just pay for this, sit at home, eat food you've already got, don't have to park cars parked outside unless your neighbors are really bad at charging you for parking, which is weird. But I think it'll work for that. And then of course you've got to consider the fact that Disney doesn't have to give up any money to anyone else. They're not even having to give up the premium video on demand fees or anything like that to places like Amazon and those sorts of places. They're keeping all the cash. So while I don't know if it's maybe the best venue for a movie like Mulan, I think it might end up working out for Disney. It might end up actually working out for Disney, at least in this sort of occasion. I don't know if it's something they'll be doing permanently going forward. I think it'll really depend on how cinemas reopen, especially here, certain other places. But I think it's something they will look into for certain movies. You're already seeing other things like One and Only Ivan and things like that coming out on Disney Plus. The premium tier stuff, this feels like an experiment. This feels like something they're going to try now. If it works for them, maybe we'll see more of it. I think it really depends on the worldwide pandemic as well for now.
Yeah. Lupe, what's your take?
I agree with James. I think for families, it's great because going to the movies is super expensive. Even if two of you go see Mulan, that's $15 each, or at least in LA. That's $30 already, plus parking, and if you buy any goodies. And I think right now, Disney's just trying to survive, and it's a good decision, I think. I don't think it's a good position to be placing like Tenet. I think it's extremely selfish to be pushing a movie and pushing people to go to movie theaters right now. I just don't think it's the safest thing. I think they should just hold it off till next year. But Mulan is a family film that I think people will enjoy. Granted, I would love to see it on the big screen because it's that kind of movie. The visuals just look really good and amazing that maybe I'll check it on drive-in. I'm not sure if they're releasing it in drive-ins, but I think it's a good deal. And the head of Disney, or I don't think the head of Disney, I forgot his name, but he said it was an experiment. So don't expect Black Widow and New Mutants to arrive on Disney Plus anytime soon. But I think it's a good move. I mean, everyone's just trying to survive, and you got to do what you got to do, and especially in these situations, everyone's losing money, so they got to find a way to make money.
I agree. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that need filled in for me still because they haven't, to my knowledge, and I've been trying to keep up with. They haven't said like they're calling it a rental. So like when they say rental, is that the way that the other PVOD things have been, like you rent it, you get it for 48 hours. Like, is that how? Because that seems kind of hefty. If it's like $30 for 48 hours, is it one watch? Do you keep it for a while? Like if you're a subscriber, does it stay? You can access it at any time. There's a lot of questions they haven't answered. I mean, this is a movie with a $200 million reported production budget, and that's before the advertising and marketing they've already put into it. So it's a big gamble. I think this probably means that Hamilton we know that it generated some interest, but it obviously must have done fairly well for them as far as income goes. But the thing that really is going to be interesting to me is how this is, the exhibition industry treats this, because Disney right now is the major player in the room. I mean, they've got a lot of the chips, and when Universal was sort of touting their success with Trolls World Tour, and they're like, we're going to put out movies in theaters or on video on demand. AMC kind of puffed up their chest and said, like, then we're boycotting you. And then we're hammered out this deal. It'll be interesting to see if AMC or any other chain, when they're dealing with Disney, which is Universal's big, but Disney's bigger, if any of them are going to say anything, because this is a big movie potentially for them. When you're talking about getting people to try to get them to go back out to theaters, like a big Disney tentpole is a big deal for them. And I know that in the UK, some of the exhibitors are kind of saying like, this is a slap in the face. Like, first of all, we weren't told this was going to happen. Secondly, this is one less thing to try to get people to come back. I'm an advocate and have been for a long time that you really shouldn't be trying to get people to come back to theaters until it's safe. However, LA is different from different parts of the country. If the health officials say it's safe for people to go see things in the theaters, if all of the regulations are followed, then I think you have to try to get the exhibition industry back up and running. But I financially, I don't know how this is going to work for Disney. They do get to keep all the revenue, but still, that's over, I think, 6.5 million people have to rent it for it to just make back its production budget. So. But it'll also be in China. There's so much that we just don't know yet. But for me, really, too, it's going to be like, what do the exhibitors have to say about this? Or do they say nothing because it's Disney and they have the Avengers and they have Star Wars and they have, all of these franchises, and they're not going to puff up to Disney the way that they have to other studios that have said we're skipping theaters.
Yeah. So my quick take on this is that number one, Dan, from what I heard and what I read today, I think it was reported today, that for the $30 price tag, you will actually get to keep Mulan as long as you have a subscription to Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. So it comes with that caveat. You have to make sure you still have the subscription, and then you'll get to keep it. My argument with a lot of this stuff is giving that information where people will own the movie on a digital format, right now, a lot of people have Vudu, Fandango Now, Amazon Prime, and all those services. A lot of people have Blu-ray libraries, DVD libraries. I don't know about you guys, but I will tell you honestly, from my point of view, I used to buy a ton of Blu-rays. I used to buy a ton of DVDs. I probably have about 50 to 100 DVDs that are not opened at all. Like I literally like a movie.
Me too.
And I think I want it. I buy it, and I never watch it again. And then maybe I'll watch it when it pops up on Netflix now or somewhere else. But I won't. Very rarely will go upstairs and actually pick up that DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. So I think with the idea of being able to own it, especially for families, where like you don't have a lot of families don't even like the physical media stuff because they rather just like, oh, the kid's crying, put Mulan on, put Trolls on, whatever it is. So them actually owning that, I think, and having it right on their system will make it a win-win. Lupe's point, of course, I'm going to jump in there and say I agree with you. I think single guys, girls watching a movie, it's a different perspective of spending $30. Anyone with a family of more than 3 people, it's a win-win for them as well. Because like you have the snacks here, buy a bag of chips, put a popcorn in the microwave, so much cheaper. Not the same experience. We all love the movie theater experience. But again, you have to do something. Last point that I will make real quick is that, Dan, one of the things that people were talking about yesterday, and it was something like there's a lot of hate within the community about this because I think we all share that passion of loving the movie theaters. But Disney Plus announced yesterday or a couple days before that they have 60 million subscribers. Now, to the 60 million subscribers that they have, they won't have to worry about that $8 fee because they're already paying it. So they'll pay like a $30, which is not that much more than most of the premium video on demand. Mm-hmm. If they can get like 25% upwards, this will wind up being a win-win for them. And just think about the fact that right now people are kind of on the fence, which I also learned yesterday. A lot of people are really on the fence about Mulan. I thought it was like a sure bet, but like people really seem like I'm not going to pay for that. And I always saw like, but for Black Widow, I would pay for that, or something else they would pay for that. I think people would pay that much for Tenet, for sure. So I think it's an interesting experiment that I don't know 100% how I feel right now, but I'm very interested to see how this plays out.
There's a lot of gray areas. Like I said, I didn't know about the, if you keep it, that does sweeten the pot a little bit, as opposed to, some of the other VODs, there's like a 48-hour window and then it goes away, and that's, kind of hefty. Obviously you have to still subscribe to Disney Plus if you keep it, or else you have to buy it again. That's why I like Blu-rays. I'm a big physical media guy because when I buy a movie, I know that movie's going to be sitting on my shelf. Because I was reading about Harry Potter, like Harry Potter was on HBO Max when it launched, and they were advertising that it's on HBO Max, but now it's jumping off HBO Max and it's going to be on Peacock for like a year, but it rotates off and off Peacock. Like, sometimes you can watch it, sometimes you can't, and then it might go back to HBO Max. Like, I like to know where my movies are. They're on my shelf. I can pick them out. I can watch them. But I'm old. I'm a Luddite. Like people like the streaming and that's great. But that's one reason why I just like to buy movies and keep them, because I know where they are. I can keep them safe.
Yeah, I'm like you, Scott. I'll be watching a movie on TV or cable, and me and my husband's like, "You have that, and you haven't even opened it." I'm like, "Yeah, but I have to go get it."
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I think about that all the time. Like, I mean, Independence Day was on TV, obviously, for the 4th of July. And we were watching it, and I'm like, it's on crappy TV with commercials, and I'm watching it. I'm like, I can go upstairs and get like the 4K copy or whatever great quality copy I have, but I'm like, nah, just let it watch it on TV with the commercials. Ah, God. Yeah, it's crazy.
You just got to be careful though with Tenet. If they do put Tenet on premium video on demand, you do run the risk of Christopher Nolan personally coming around to everyone's houses and pouring a cup of tea down over their Roku device or their Amazon device just to switch it off, because he does not want that to happen. He does not want that to happen. He has a big screen IMAX on.
The only reason why it's a conversation still, right? Because I think the way I take that story is that if Warner Brothers had their say with this, they would just move it to next year because
Mhm.
like they just want it, like they want it to be a sure bet. He's a filmmaker that they signed a lot of contracts with, but he keeps pushing for it, and it's like, guys, I mean, I understand that like some people are antsy and they want to get back to theaters, but like a movie of that magnitude right now, that's not the way to start.
What have you seen? I mean, if you follow Twitter and you follow Tenet, people are angry.
Oh yeah.
That it's going to be, and they're mad at Christopher Nolan. Like, come on, we know it's this guy. Just freaking push it. Or I mean, well, a lot of people want to see it on digital. I don't think it should be on digital.
No, I don't think it should be on digital either.
But people are getting. I think they're gonna have a backlash.
I think it's a bit like I see where Christopher Nolan is coming from, and that he loves movies so much that he wants to like be the thing that entices people to get out there and sort of save traditional exhibition, because he's so much about shooting on film and like I understand the root of where he's coming from, but at the same time, at this point, it does seem a little reckless in the sense of like, we're getting into the theater as soon as we can, no matter what. It's like, let's just let's pause. Let's, I don't know. I think I've said my opinion is to a certain extent. I think that you should try to make sure that you can keep people in business and employed as much as you can. But part of me is also saying like, let's just pause 2020 altogether and just say like, let's plan 2021. Let's just figure things out because there's just too many. We don't know what's going to happen from 1 week to the next week. It could change. It can turn on a dime.
Absolutely. All right, guys, a great episode, everyone. Lots of great conversation. Just one more time around the table to like let everyone know where they can find you as we check out of the show. Let's start with Lupe.
Okay, you can find me at Cine Movie TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. So we got tons of we have movie reviews and interviews on YouTube, and everywhere else is just commentary.
Okay, cool. James?
I can be found on empireonline.com, and as I said before, my new blog, which is called J Writes, but sits at jameswhite.substack.com, and it's just a load of me writing reviews about stuff, writing opinions about stuff, writing nonsense mostly. So, the usual.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Dan?
On YouTube, youtube.com/Dan Murrell Movies. And also you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MurrellDan. And everywhere else that movies are talked about.
There you go. Awesome. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at The Other Scott M, and you can go over to WeLiveEntertainment.com to read some of my written reviews and interviews. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We're actually going to do a special horror-themed episode. We're going to talk about all horror movies next week. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see everyone. And you guys, this was a great panel today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. It was fun.
Thank you.
Great. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.